I never imagined I'd be sharing this story. It's one of those memories that stays buried deep, hidden in the corners of your mind, only surfacing when you least expect it. But the other night, I went to KFC for the first time in years, and the scent of fried chicken brought it all rushing back, the fear, the confusion, the moment I almost vanished. This happened nearly 2 decades ago when I was just 8 years old. My family didn't eat out often, but KFC was different. Maybe because it wasn't just fast food, it felt like a real meal. A big bucket of crispy chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, warm buttery biscuits. It was special. My dad was usually the one who picked it up, bringing it home while my mom set the table. But one Saturday night, for no particular reason, I decided to go with him. It was around 6:30 p.m., that time of evening when the sky is already dim and the air carries a sharp chill. It must have been either fall or spring because I remember wearing a light jacket. The KFC was just a short drive away, sitting at the edge of a small shopping center. The red and white neon sign flickered slightly, buzzing faintly against the hum of passing traffic. Inside, the place was empty. No customers were sitting down, just one man ahead of us in line placing his order. My dad stood behind him, waiting. I was never good at standing still, easily bored as a kid, so I wandered off to explore the nearly deserted restaurant. That was the last time I ever felt safe inside a KFC. I walked toward the back corner near a side door leading to the parking lot. The glass was streaked from past rain, reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights outside. As I stared out into the night, I heard the chime of the main entrance behind me. A man walked in. At first, I barely noticed him. He wasn't remarkable, medium height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. He headed straight toward my dad, but I didn't hear what he said. Maybe I just didn't care. I was more focused on what happened next. From the door beside me, a woman stepped inside. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't a customer. She didn't belong there. She smiled at me, wide, friendly, maybe too friendly. "Hey there," she said, extending her hand. I was a polite kid. My parents had always taught me to shake hands when introduced to someone. So, I reached out. That's when I knew something was wrong. She didn't let go. Before I could react, her grip tightened, and she took a step back toward the door. I hesitated, confused, my brain still catching up to what was happening. Then, suddenly, we were outside. I don't even remember taking a step, but the cold night air hit my face, and the distant sounds of the street filled my ears. She held on to me firmly, pulling me toward the side of the building. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I was just confused. "I just want to show you something real quick," she said, her voice gentle, like a mother speaking to a child. That's when I saw the van. It was old, run down, its paint faded and peeling, rust creeping along the edges. The sliding door was already open. And then I saw him. The man who had been inside KFC talking to my dad was now sprinting toward us from the other side of the building. I felt hands on my waist as the woman lifted me up, shoving me toward the open van door. My mind finally caught up. I started to struggle. I kicked, but I wasn't strong enough. I tried to yell, but the sound barely came out. Then, I heard something else. Heavy footsteps. Someone running. A voice, sharp and furious, cutting through the night. "Hey! Let him go." I turned my head just in time to see my dad charging around the corner, his face twisted in pure rage. The woman shrieked at the man, "Go! Get in the van!" The man hesitated, his hands gripping the steering wheel, but he didn't start the engine. "Let him out," he said, his voice unsteady. "What are you, stupid? Go," the woman screamed. But my dad was already there. He reached the van just as the woman flung the door open and shoved me out. I hit the pavement hard, my hands scraping against the rough ground. Then, my dad was there, pulling me into his arms as the van screeched away into the night. I remember him yelling after it, pointing, shouting something about no license plates, about calling the police. But I wasn't listening. I was staring at the empty space where the van had been. I almost disappeared. The next few hours blurred together. The employees were shaken, but they hadn't seen much. They let my dad use the phone to call the police. I sat in a booth, shaking, as an officer knelt in front of me, asking questions. "Did you recognize them?" "No." "What kind of vehicle was it?" "An old van. Blue, I think." I remember my dad pacing, fists clenched, breathing heavy. I had never seen him that angry before. I never found out if they caught them. The police took our statements, but as far as I know, those people were never arrested. It was the summer after my junior year of high school, and my older brother, Daniel, had just graduated. He had been accepted into a few colleges down south, so our family planned a road trip to visit them. It wasn't exactly a trip I was excited about. I would have much rather stayed home playing video games with my friends, but my parents insisted this was something we should experience together. We lived in Indiana, and our route took us through Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia before reaching Florida, where Daniel's top choice, a private university, was located. The first 2 days of the trip were uneventful, just endless highways, pit stops at random gas stations, and my dad's questionable taste in old-school rock blasting from the speakers. By the third night, we were deep in Tennessee, somewhere between Nashville and Chattanooga. It was past 11 p.m., and exhaustion was settling in. My mom had been dozing in the front seat for over an hour, my brother was out cold in the middle row, and I sat in the back, earbuds in, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to stay awake. That's when my dad muttered, "Damn, we're low on gas." I glanced up. The highway was mostly empty, aside from the occasional truck speeding past. The fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty as my dad started scanning the exits for a gas station. "There's gotta be one coming up," he mumbled, rubbing his tired eyes. Sure enough, a sign appeared, "Exit 212, food, gas, lodging." A few logos were listed, and I caught a glimpse of a KFC sign. "Let's stop there." "I could eat," I said. Dad took the exit, but as soon as we turned onto the local road, the atmosphere shifted. It was dark, too dark. The kind of darkness that made it hard to see more than 100 feet ahead. The streetlights were sparse, flickering weakly against the empty road. Everything about the area felt off. The buildings looked worn down, some abandoned. A few businesses had missing letters on their signs, making them look eerily distorted. The only cars we saw were either parked along the roadside or creeping by unnaturally slow, their headlights dim. "Where the hell are we?" my dad muttered. The GPS guided us further into town, and eventually, we pulled up to a KFC attached to a gas station, one of those older setups where the fast food joint shared space with a convenience store. The neon lights buzzed faintly, and the drive-thru menu had letters missing. We parked near the pumps, and my dad shut off the engine. "I'm gonna fill up." "Marcus, go inside and grab me a coffee," he said, tossing me a few bills. I hesitated. Something about this place felt wrong. But I shook it off and nodded. "All right." As soon as I stepped out, the humidity hit me like a wall. The air was thick, almost suffocating. Pulling my hoodie over my head, I made my way to the KFC entrance and pushed the door open. Silence. No background music. No kitchen noise. Just an eerie stillness. Only one employee stood behind the counter, a pale, skinny guy in his mid-20s. He looked half asleep, leaning against the counter with a vacant stare. I stepped forward hesitantly. Hey. Can I get a coffee?" He didn't respond right away. He blinked, slowly, before finally saying, "Coffee's in the gas station part." We only do food here. I nodded, glancing around. There were only 2 customers inside. One man sat in the far corner, wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses, at night. The other sat near the bathroom, staring at his untouched food. Both of them felt wrong. I turned to leave, but as I did, the man in the corner shifted slightly in his seat. His sunglasses reflected the dim, flickering light above, but I could feel his gaze locked onto me. A chill ran through me. Swallowing hard, I walked toward the gas station section. The convenience store was just as unsettling. The shelves were half empty, the aisles dimly lit, and the air carried a strange odor, a mix of old grease and something metallic. I found a coffee station near the back, poured a cup quickly, and grabbed a bottle of water for myself. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I looked up at the convex security mirror hanging in the corner. The man from the KFC's corner seat was now in the aisle behind me. Just standing there. His head tilted slightly, watching me through his sunglasses. A knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the counter, only to realize there was another man, also wearing sunglasses, standing near the fridge section. That made 3. I placed my items down, glancing at the cashier, an older woman with tired eyes. She barely looked up as she rang me up. As I paid, I risked another look around. The 3 men had moved. One now stood in the chips aisle. One near the door. One right by the coffee station, where I had been just moments before. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Grabbing my stuff, I made my way toward the exit, keeping my movements casual. As soon as I stepped outside, my eyes darted to our SUV. My dad was still at the pump, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware. My mom and brother remained asleep inside. Then I saw them. 2 more men, both wearing sunglasses, walking toward our car. My stomach dropped. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I picked up my pace, gripping the coffee cup tighter. I was about halfway to the SUV when I stole another glance back. The 3 men from inside had followed me out. The 2 near our car were barely 10 feet from my dad. Panic surged through me. I ran. Dad! Go. Now. He looked up, confused. What? Go where? Get in the car, now. He saw the urgency in my face. The realization hit him. By then, all 5 men were moving quickly, closing in. Without hesitation, my dad jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. I barely managed to dive into the back before he threw the car into drive. As we sped out of the lot, I glanced out the window. The 5 men stood there, watching us. Not yelling, not chasing, just watching. We didn't stop for another 2 hours. That night, after checking into our hotel, I told my dad everything. He was shaken but didn't want to alarm my mom or brother. We never found out who those men were, why they were watching us, or what would have happened if we had stayed just a few minutes longer. But I'll never forget the way they moved, too calm, too deliberate. And the sunglasses at night. Even now, I wonder if they were even human. I never expected that night to linger in my memory the way it has. Honestly, I'd never given much thought to that KFC before, it was just a random place I'd stopped at a few times for a quick bite. But after that night, I never stepped foot in there again. This happened around 4 years ago. My friend Brandon was returning from a trip, and I had agreed to pick him up from the airport. I had dropped him off when he left, so it made sense I'd be the one to bring him back. We had been close since high school, and truthfully, I probably wouldn't have done it for anyone else. But Brandon wasn't just anyone. Besides, he tossed me a bit of cash for the trouble, so I didn't mind too much. His flight ended up being delayed by an hour, so I spent that time sitting in my car, scrolling through my phone, trying not to drift off. By the time he finally landed and collected his bags, it was nearing 1 a.m. We shared a few jokes on the drive back, and after I dropped him off at his place, I began my journey home. It wasn't until I was halfway back that I realized my gas tank was nearly empty. I sighed, knowing I'd have to stop somewhere. I pulled into the first gas station I spotted, a KFC with a 24-hour gas station attached. It wasn't my preferred choice, but it was the only one open, and I wasn't about to risk running out of gas in the middle of nowhere. I parked at the pump, got out, and swiped my card. The place was deserted, no other cars at the pumps, and inside, the only light was the faint, flickering glow of old fluorescent bulbs. While filling the tank, I felt a familiar, uncomfortable pressure in my stomach. I needed a restroom, badly. Once the pump clicked off, I returned the nozzle and locked my car. The glass doors of the KFC convenience store slid open as I entered. Inside, it was eerily quiet, the only noise coming from the low hum of the refrigerators. The whole place felt wrong, like I had wandered into a space I wasn't meant to be in. An older man, probably in his late 50s, stood behind the counter, barely glancing up as I walked by. I headed towards the back where the restrooms were located. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the light inside buzzed and flickered, casting a harsh glare every few seconds. I hurried, not wanting to linger longer than necessary. As I washed my hands, everything suddenly went dark, the whole building lost power. I froze. The hum of the refrigerators, the buzzing lights, even the distant sound of a fan, all of it ceased. My breath caught in my throat. My first thought was a power outage, but there hadn't been any signs, no lightning, no wind, just moments ago, everything was fine. I reached into my pocket for my phone, but it wasn't there. Damn. I must have left it in the car, as I often did when driving. I carefully felt my way to the door, pushing it open and stepping back into the pitch-black KFC. The only illumination came from the faint moonlight filtering through the front windows. Shadows stretched across the floor, twisting everything into eerie shapes. Then I heard them, footsteps. Not mine. They were slow, deliberate. I swallowed hard, attempting to sound casual. "Power's out, huh?" I said, trying to break the silence. No response. I cleared my throat, taking another cautious step. "Anyone else here?" Still nothing. I glanced towards the counter where the old man had been. He was gone. The realization made my skin crawl. I turned toward the front door, deciding I didn't want any part of whatever was happening here. That's when a hand grabbed my arm, hard. I didn't have time to react before I was pulled backward. My balance faltered, and I crashed to the floor, my elbow slamming painfully against the tiles. Panic flared in my chest as I felt myself being dragged. I thrashed wildly, my foot making contact with something solid. There was a grunt, a low, pained noise, but I still couldn't see anything. I scrambled to my feet and bolted toward where I thought the exit was, only to collide with a display rack, sending snacks and bottles tumbling to the ground. Behind me, the heavy footsteps drew closer. Another hand grabbed my wrist, trying to pull me back. I didn't think, I just reacted. I swung my arm with all my strength, twisting my body as I kicked backward. My heel struck something, someone's leg. A deep voice cursed in pain. That was my chance. I broke free, sprinting to the front door and shoving it open with my shoulder. Outside, I realized the entire gas station was cloaked in darkness too. I didn't stop, I ran straight for my car, yanking the door open. The moment I was inside, I locked the doors and fired up the engine. My hands trembled, and my breaths were ragged and fast. Just as I was about to peel out, I heard the passenger door handle rattle, followed by a loud thud against the side of my car. I didn't dare look back. I floored the gas pedal, tires squealing as I tore out of the lot. By the time I made it home, my hands were still shaking. I locked every door, double-checked the windows, and collapsed onto my couch, trying to steady my racing heart. I never returned to that KFC again, but every time I pass it on the highway, that same unease washes over me. What the hell happened that night? I never imagined a simple stop at KFC would turn into the most terrifying night of my life. It's one of those moments that sticks with you, burned into your memory. Now, every time I drive past a fast food place late at night, I get this uneasy feeling, like something is lurking in the shadows, watching. It happened last year on what should have been an ordinary night. I had just finished running errands, picking up groceries, grabbing a few things from the store, and was on my way home. It was around 9 p.m., not exactly late, but the streets were mostly empty. I hadn't eaten all day, and as I passed a KFC near the shopping plaza, the craving hit. The kind where nothing else would do. A crispy chicken sandwich, some fries, a drink, quick, simple. I pulled into the drive-thru, noticing the parking lot was nearly empty except for a few employee cars in the back. The neon sign buzzed softly, its red and white glow reflecting off the damp pavement. As I rolled up to the menu board, I lowered my window and waited for the speaker to crackle to life. Nothing. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, waiting. Still nothing. I glanced around, the lights inside were on, and I could see into the kitchen, but there wasn't a single worker or customer in sight. Hello. I called out, but got no response. I waited a few more seconds before leaning out my window, scanning for movement inside. The parking lot remained eerily still, the back lot swallowed in darkness. Something felt off. Then, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. A large truck, probably an old Chevy or Ford, pulled into the drive-thru behind me, its engine rumbling loudly. The glare from the headlights was almost blinding in my mirrors. I grabbed my phone, thinking maybe the KFC had closed early or the speaker was broken. As I started searching, a sudden, blaring honk from the truck made me jump. I looked up, squinting against the bright lights. The driver was impatient, clearly irritated. I sighed, about to pull forward and just leave when I heard it. A car door opening. Then, the sound of heavy boots on pavement. I turned my head just as a man appeared at my window, startlingly close. His hair was long and unkempt, his beard scruffy. His clothes were filthy, like he had been wearing them for days. But it was his eyes that unsettled me the most, glazed over, dark, locked onto mine. "You gonna move or what?" he barked. I blinked, caught off guard. I don't think they're open," I said, keeping my voice calm. "No one's answering." He inhaled sharply, then let out a harsh, almost mocking laugh, shaking his head. "So you're just sitting here on your phone, wasting time?" His tone shifted, irritation giving way to something sharper, angrier. "You think this is funny?" I felt my stomach twist. Something was seriously wrong with him. I had two choices, argue or leave. I chose the second. "All right, man. Whatever." I muttered, shifting my car into drive and pulling forward. As I left the drive-thru, I checked my rearview mirror. The man had turned back toward his truck, mumbling something to himself. But as I pulled onto the main road, I saw his headlights flick on. He was following me. At first, I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just leaving too. But then his truck accelerated, closing the gap between us. His high beams flashed, and he laid on his horn, tailgating me aggressively. I was in a small sedan, barely a few years old. He was in a massive lifted truck, an absolute beast of a machine. If he wanted to, he could total my car in seconds. And from the way he was driving, that seemed to be exactly what he intended to do. We passed the shopping center, moving into a more rural stretch of road. No gas stations. No stoplights. Just miles of darkness, lined by trees on both sides. That's when he swerved into the oncoming lane, speeding up to drive beside me. I looked over. His window was down. He was yelling something, though I couldn't make out the words. Then, suddenly, he veered toward my car. I barely reacted in time, swerving to avoid him. My tires skidded, my heart hammering in my chest. My hands were locked onto the wheel, knuckles white. I couldn't outrun him, his truck was too powerful. I needed a way out. Then I saw it, a sharp turn up ahead. I hit the brakes hard, letting my car slow just enough before yanking the wheel and taking the curve. The truck, still moving at full speed, barreled straight ahead, right off the road. I pulled off to the side, breathing heavily, my hands shaking as I watched. The truck had skidded into a ditch, its tires spinning uselessly in the mud. The driver's door burst open, and I saw him stumble out, furious. He slammed his fists against the hood, screaming in frustration. I didn't wait. I floored the gas and sped away, heading straight for the nearest police station. The officers took my report, but I never found out if they caught him. They told me I was lucky. Guys like that, especially when they're high or drunk, don't care who they hurt. If I hadn't reacted the way I did, I might not have made it out. Even now, I still think about that night. About how, if I had hesitated for just a second longer, if I had argued instead of leaving, if I had made even the smallest mistake, I might not be here to tell this story. And every time I see a KFC drive-thru at night, I can't help but wonder. Is he still out there? I never believed in ghosts. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd experience something straight out of a horror movie while working at KFC, I would have laughed. But I don't laugh anymore. I've been working at KFC for about a year now, mostly late shifts. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills. My usual shift starts at 4 p.m. and ends at 11 p.m., sometimes later if we need extra time to clean up. That Thursday night felt no different from any other. I was working with my manager, Jake, our drive-thru cashier, Lisa, and another kitchen worker, Brandon. It was that awkward time of night, past the dinner rush but still too early to close. We weren't particularly busy, just serving the occasional drive-thru customer. The lobby had been dead for over an hour, which was fine by me, less mess to clean. At around 9:10 p.m., I was putting together a famous bowl when the front door chimed. Out of habit, I glanced up, expecting to see some late-night customer. But when I looked at the entrance, no one was there. I frowned, leaning over the counter for a better look. The lobby was completely empty. Weird. Maybe the wind had nudged the door open. Shaking it off, I turned back to packing orders. Jake was bagging a family meal for the drive-thru while Lisa handed change to a customer at the window. The whole restaurant was unusually quiet. Then, hey! I froze. There was a girl standing at the counter. I swear she hadn't been there a second ago. I had only looked away for maybe 2 seconds, but suddenly, there she was. She looked about my age, early 20s, with dark hair, bright eyes, and pale skin. She was stunning, honestly. But something about her felt off. Not in a bad way, just different. Her expression was calm, too calm. I shook off the weird feeling and forced a polite smile. Hey, welcome to KFC. What can I get for you? She smiled, tilting her head slightly. 2-piece meal. Mac and cheese. Large drink. I nodded and started punching in the order. As I did, she leaned in slightly, watching me a little too closely. You look good in that uniform. I hesitated. That was unexpected. Thanks, I said, letting out a small, awkward chuckle. No, really. Her voice was soft but confident. You're cute. My face went warm. I wasn't used to customers flirting with me, especially someone as gorgeous as her. Appreciate it, I said, trying to stay cool. Turning away, I grabbed her food, feeling my heart race a little. Maybe I was overthinking it, but something about her unsettled me, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Once her meal was ready, I set the bag on the counter. Your order's ready. Silence. I looked up. She was gone. I blinked, scanning the lobby. Still empty. The bag sat untouched on the counter. I frowned. Where the hell did she go? I glanced toward the restrooms. Maybe she had stepped away before I called her order. But I hadn't heard her walk off. The restaurant wasn't big, and the tiled floors made it impossible to move silently. Stepping around the counter, I peered into the dining area. Nothing. Your food's here, I called out. No response. A chill ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. I hesitated before knocking on the women's restroom door. Hey, your food's ready. Still nothing. I slowly pushed the door open. The lights were on. The stalls were open. Completely empty. I swallowed hard. How did she leave without making a sound? An hour passed. By the time we locked up at 11 p.m., I had almost convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. Maybe she had just walked out, and I hadn't noticed. Before leaving, I returned to the counter, ready to toss out the untouched food. But as I reached for the bag, my breath caught. The drink was gone. The food was still there, untouched. But the large drink? Completely missing. I looked around, my pulse hammering. My co-workers were all in the kitchen, finishing up their tasks. No one had been near the counter. So who took the drink? By the time I clocked out, I was exhausted. My 20-minute walk home felt longer than usual. The streets were empty, the only sounds my footsteps and the occasional distant car. About 10 minutes into my walk, that familiar, creeping feeling set in, the feeling of being watched. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance behind me. And my blood ran cold. She was there. Standing about 500 feet down the road. The same girl from the restaurant. My breath hitched. She wasn't walking. She wasn't moving at all. Just standing there. I blinked. She was gone. My stomach twisted. I spun around completely, scanning the street. Nowhere. No alleys. No side streets. A cold sweat formed on my neck. Then, from right behind me, you walk fast. I whipped around. No one. That was it. I ran. I sprinted the rest of the way home, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. When I reached my apartment, I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropping them before shoving the door open and locking it behind me. I stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking, for a long time. I didn't move. The next day at work, I pulled Jake aside. Dude, something weird happened last night. I told him everything, the girl, the missing drink, seeing her on my way home. At first, he looked amused, like he thought I was messing with him. But as I described her, dark hair, bright eyes, pale skin, his expression changed. His face drained of color. Wait, what did you say she looked like? I repeated it. His reaction was something I couldn't quite place, fear, disbelief, something else. That sounds like Kay. A chill ran through me. Who's Kay? He hesitated. She used to work here. Died in a car accident a few months before you started. A heavy silence filled the space between us. You're messing with me. Jake shook his head. I wish I was. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that her order was never picked up. And somehow, I had a feeling, it never would be.